problems. Currently, we have nationals as the team leader, and we also have the program implementation director, who is also a Papua New Guinean. We have 32 staff, 27 nationals, and we have only 5 international NGO, international staff. But I wanted to make this point clear that you can see that this is a program that is actually driven by the nationals of Papua New Guinea. Just a snapshot of what we are doing in the country as a program. We provide funding to 4 components: Coalition for Change, Church Partnership. The Church Partnership program has been in operation in PNG for the last 20 years. And the government partnership, we focus mainly on the 3 government agencies, and that is the Department of Implementation, Rural Development, the Department of Community Development and Religion, and the Department of National Planning, which is the agency that coordinates all the funding into the country. We're also supporting the media partnership, and this is a partnership between ABC International and NBC PNG. And this is also another program that has been in the country, implementing in the country for nearly about 18 years. And social accountability is a new one, but it is not new in the sense where the support that is being provided to international organization that is doing social accountability in PNG. We also, under this component, we are trying to do something different, where we are trying to target reform-minded MPs in the country. We do have some MPs that are really genuine and they wanted to see change in their own districts. So that's one thing that we will be also focusing on, and also other additional partners coming on board. You can see this is just a map. It's not really a good map, but you can see that we have 4 regions in Papua New Guinea, and this is a program that supports CSOs, local NGOs, churches, that works throughout Papua New Guinea. So currently we are supporting or providing funding and work in partnership with 15 organizations, including the churches in PNG. So for us as a program, we've actually designed a locally led framework. And our thinking on the program, because the program started last year, so the thinking behind the locally led framework for us is for 2 reasons. And we wanted to implement it in 2 phases as well. The first one was we want to lay groundwork to advance the framework and focus on fundamental activities for staff in the program. And the second one was focus to support partners as they articulate their own visions and progress on their own localization journey. Number 2 on the program, we've established a strategic advisory pool, and this is a pool of people, but they're all Papua New Guineans that have vast experience in the country in economics, empowerment, in gender or JETSI, in sorcery, accusation, violence as well. We have people who have a lot of experience working at districts, provinces, or at the subnational. So this is a pool that provides, this is a pool of advisors that provides support and advice to the senior management team and also our program team. We are an adaptive management program, and I will tell you more in the next slide why I'm saying that we are an adaptive program. Also on the program, we have a critical friend arrangement, and this comprises of an international, just one, and also a Papua New Guinean. So these are people that sit outside of the program. They are not employed on the program. They sit outside and they see how we're working, and they provide constructive feedback on how we could improve the way we engage and partner with our organizations, other organizations. As part of our locally led framework, we have 5 focused areas. One of them is enhanced leadership and skills of current and emerging local leaders. you will see that I'm using local leaders here because most of the times we're always referring to national staff as locally engaged staff. But we are trying to change the kind of wordings that we also use on the program. So we refer to them as local leaders. Create opportunities for current and emerging local leaders to practice and demonstrate leadership. We also want to celebrate, amplify, and make local leadership visible. And I think I'm a good example of that, where I'm standing here and talking to you all this morning. Create an authorizing, enabling environment for local leadership and support partners on their own journey towards locally led development. And some of the examples that we are thinking on how we can achieve our focus areas was one of them in the program. We've now doing an assessment of the current different skills and capabilities that each of the staff bring to the table. We're also trying to identify, nurture emerging leaders through internship, recruitment, our recruitment practices, especially women. And we're already starting with this on the program where, because in PNG, human resource in the development space is very thin. It's not like before. We are in competition with other programs, with other donor agencies in the country. Everyone is interested in PNG. So what we did as a program was, because we're already a program, we will focus on implementing the program, but also focused on strengthening capacities of maybe students. So we've got a little program now on BSEP where we try to encourage internship on the program. We also have a couple of our staff engaged in a emerging leaders program that our DT Global is doing for all the programs in the Pacific and Indonesia as well. For great opportunities for current emerging leaders, we continue to support the current cohort of local leaders that we have on the program. We're also trying to, identify pathways that for junior staff to venture into the different positions in the program. And I think one of the things with this is one program in Papua New Guinea that the current staff that we have now, in the 32 current staff, we actually recruited people outside of Port Moresby. So you can see, sometimes opportunities are only available for people living in the capital city, but this is an opportunity that we saw that people who were working outside also had the capabilities to be working on programs like this, and they are the ones providing the advice to us on how we work at the provinces and at the subnational. For this one, making local leadership visible, we'd like to profile and promote existing leaders via case studies. And this is not just talking about, local leaders and staff of BSEP, but this is also with our partners, profiling our partners as well, doing case studies, and documenting it and sharing it with the other organizations that we work in. So one of the things that we did, and I'd like to use another example on this, was we did a partners forum where we brought women that are working in the sorcery accusation violence in PNG. And they were all in one room and they spoke about what they have done, the difficulties that they are going through, and they asked us, where are the government officials in here? Where are people who are managing the mechanisms that are supposed to be helping us to address these issues not here? So, I mean, for us as a program, we see ourselves as, a program, an avenue where people can come in and share the experience, and also we can also identify avenues where they can share their information and experiences and how they can get help. Enabling environment, continue advocate, support reform, and that is at the, I refer to DT Global as well, because it's a company that is managing it, and also DFET in favor of greater local leadership within all the programs that they are implementing in the nation. Support partners, continue to support partners to articulate their own localizations, ambitions. We support partners who want to localize, especially, providing assistance in their training and other requirements that they need to build the capabilities of their own organization on that. So coming back to the adaptive management framework, why is it important for a locally led program like BSEP? So we want to be flexible. We want to be flexible in the sense that we want to have the capacity to adjust things if needed as we are going along. We wanted to be responsive, proactively reading the external environment, tracking politics, taking into feedback and adapting activities. We encourage purposeful learning. Learning takes place in a very structured way, and it's systematic, and it's also able to shape a programming as well. And culture. Culture is something that we will never go past culture. Overcoming the inherent asymmetries of power and building levels, deep mutual trust and respect. Why I say adaptive management is a framework that will assist our thinking and our journey in localization. It's simply because sometimes when we design a program, the design were made like 2-3 years ago. So when the program starts, you will find that the contexts have changed, and we will need to use this framework to help us on how we make it relevant for the program. Localization versus locally led. On the program, as a program, we decided we prefer to use the phrase locally led development, and for these key reasons. It better describes what BSEP hopes to achieve, which is the most important step in a genuine localization process. Locally led development phrase is a strength-based approach. It recognizes the role of local actors. It recognizes the existing capacity and the capability for locally led driven change rather than an external driven process. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone. I'm Petrarca, and it's a real pleasure to be here. I've not for lack of trying, I wanted to attend the AAC before, and so, but after countless abstracts and proposals, I'm finally here because of Andrew and Kirsten's invitation, so I really appreciate this. Let me just start with one aspect of locally led development. Is Ted here? Ted Wehau is our Director for Implementation, and both of us are leading SKALA. One aspect of this is that we're both born and raised in Papua, so not only this aspect of locally led, but also representing marginalized or minority communities, both from a religious perspective as well as from an ethnic perspective, I think is one of the other aspects of what locally led development provides for development and for programs overall. So I just wanted to add that SKALA, as you can see, is yet another acronym, but it stands for in Indonesia, Sinergi dan Kolaborasi untuk Akselerasi Layanan Dasar, or synergies and collaboration for basic service acceleration. And I really appreciated the last question of the last session where, this is another one of those fancy governance programs. And I think one of our challenges has always been how can we show the actual benefit of these programs. I mean, for the case of Indonesia, it is much about the fact that we're leveraging over a whole lot of more resources than what is being contributed through the development program itself. So let's say around one of the data systems that we're supporting, Indonesia's actually committed $400 million on that. So the fact that our program is actually able to position and support in the utilization of that data set is actually important. But we're trying to deliver this program, as it says there, that we are trying to help reduce poverty and inequality within Indonesia by improving basic service provision to the poor and vulnerable communities in less developed regions. So right from the start, it's actually a very micro-focused approach on policy. We're talking about poor and vulnerable people. Being very specific, what we're talking about is women, children, people with disabilities, and indigenous groups that are at risk. And so how we're doing this is working through 3 pillars, in a sense. The first pillar is working with the national government on how can we help to ensure that regulations and policies are better synchronized, there's more coordination, and it's very much about being driven by the government's leadership and the government's agenda and how we can add value in that process. The second pillar is working directly with local governments and on their actual capacity to deliver basic services, particularly on how are they planning and budgeting these to deliver the services. The third aspect, which I think is important and will help SKALA actually show that we're making a difference, is where we're working to provide the space for vulnerable communities, leaders from there to be able to have the space to provide representation and influence planning and budgeting. But a particular part of this as well is in looking at how our data systems and data sets actually representative of our vulnerable communities. So with those 3 pillars, also wanted to show that, okay, SKALA's been, in terms of a contract, has been operational for a year, but it's actually building off decades of engagement in the decentralization space. And I think part of being locally led is that we bring that institutional memory as well, and how we're building on assets and investments in the past. Sometimes when we're still in the piloting mode, we're actually doing a lot of things before it's actually the conditions are actually ready to adopt them. And so, but how as we've proceeded in piloting through programs such as Access Logica and Antara in the early 2000s, then into AIPD, Australia-Indonesia Partnership for Decentralization, Decentralization Support Facility, and other programs. We're starting to look at replication, and now with SKALA, and following from Compact, Anna's there, who was the leader of Compact, and now into SKALA, that we're shifting from replicating and now looking at scaling those practices. And so it's an extensive history of engagement in which there's been also a process of engagement and building trust and relationships with, particularly with government. One of the things for us is how are we positioning as a program, and we really want to downgrade. It's not about, what's important is not SKALA itself, but the role and the capacity of government in what they're doing in delivering services for marginalized and vulnerable communities. And so how can SKALA play a strong function and we position ourselves actually as a joint secretariat of the 3 key ministries. This is just showing that across the three key ministries, these are the directors that we're working with, and I think it reflects a bit about the complexity of Indonesia's decentralization system. We're working with around 20 directorates across the 3 ministries, and so how can we play a function and play a role there in support of the leadership of these 3 ministries. And so what we've done is also specifically identify what is our role and what is our intent as a program team. So we've put that down as simplifying down to 3 Ps, praktek, pembelajaran, and pengaruh. So praktek is being smart, helping to ensure smart practices are being scaled and replicated. Pembelajaran, how are we being effective, supporting an effective learning process, and influence, actually really investing more in the communication and communication and coordination aspect of the work that allows for more space for interaction and to build collaboration. Where we're working, this actually shows we're working in areas, and each of these areas were actually selected by the government of Indonesia, combining a composite of 6 different indexes to be able to actually select these provinces, which included from disaster, frequency of natural disasters through to poverty, through to human development indexes and other indicators. So we're working in 8+2 because it was originally 8 provinces, but because we've got additional provinces established in Papua, so it's, we've added 2 there, so it equals 10. And 103 districts, which is about 20% of overall Indonesia's local governments. And that, once we calculated it, tabulated that, it was around 25.7 million people. And what I wanted to highlight here is that we are working in very diverse geographical contexts, very political regions, and that there's the differences are also, we can see in terms of leadership, in terms of competence, and in terms of authority, and how that affects our program delivery across the different provinces. So I wanted to end with this slide just saying that we're actually, so based on what I was saying, is that this, why for us locally led development works within the context of Indonesia is because one is the level of engagement or the length of engagement in a sense. So it's a very mature relationship that we have with government. It's a very strong capacity that exists within government. And so if you see this, where if it's a seesaw, it's tilted more towards the fact that it's a mature rather than an early or initial relationship. So that's what we can build on. It's also that the type of engagement is slanted more towards being political rather than technical. There's still a lot of technical work. And so, for instance, our work with, in Papua around special autonomy funds, how to better distribute and allocate funds for special autonomy in Papua. The fact that we had the mature relationships with government provided us with a position that we could help in supporting develop the regulations and the training of Papuan officials in implementing the new special autonomy regulations. Also in terms of the type of policy, because we're working on vulnerable communities in regions that are underdeveloped and no one size fits all, it's very much a micro type of policy that we're interacting with. And so here as well, locally led development, I think it also works because just having to be able to get local understanding of what are the contexts, the micro contexts that impact on service delivery really makes it difficult if it's not with a person that really has not just sympathy, but let's say empathy, or has actually experienced these sort of conditions and what are the types of policies that are required to address this. So, yeah, so I'll stop there and thank you for, I look forward to your questions.
Good morning, everyone. Just want to start with thanks for the opportunity to share the case study on locally led development that focus on civil society strengthening on gender equality, disability, and social inclusion in Indonesia. I'll start with a question: why is locally led development that focus on civil society strengthening is very important in a country like Indonesia, a country with social and geographical environment that is one of the most complex and varied in the world, a country with more than 17,000 islands, more than 700 local languages are spoken across more than 70,000 villages. Over the decades of development in Indonesia, civil society has played an integral part to support government to deliver development for all. Civil society in Indonesia deliver core functions such as advocacy, service provision, community empowerment, and some of them also do research. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we also saw in Indonesia the consequence from the pandemic put emphasis on crucial role of civil society were they able to reach the most vulnerable group that at the time the government have limited capacity to reach the most vulnerable group in access essential services. So this showcased civil society pivotal role to reach the group that the government could not reach due to limited resource because of the wide geographic coverage of Indonesia. The second context I would like to elaborate is how Australia tried to unpack all of these challenges of development in Indonesia through decades of support to the development in Indonesia. Australia has supported civil society work in Indonesia to address development challenge built on the realization of civil society important role as government partner to ensure no one left in development. So Inklusi Australia-Indonesia partnership built on all of this lesson learned from predecessor program, and Inklusi is Australia recent bilateral program in Indonesia that based its approach on the strengths of civil society, aim to empower marginalized group to access their basic service and also protect them from violence and also support and empower civil society in access to livelihood and also promote their participation in public policy. Inklusi, Australian government co-designed it with the government of Indonesia and civil society. It means to be a training field to demonstrate that government and civil society could coexist to deliver development. And with all of this, Inklusi include key features that is led by the strength of the civil society, and then they also analyze intersecting disadvantage that hamper marginalized group to access their basic human rights. Inklusi deliver the program through a flexible grant to civil society that some of the fund also use as core funding for the civil society organization, means for them to also able to deliver their core mandate. This is an important element to demonstrate a good model of locally development that focus on civil society strengthening, design at the local level, and implement by the local champion of resource. So this slide shows inclusive coverage in terms of numbers of CSO partners and geographical areas coverage. Inclusive, the area with light blue color is area where Inklusi works, working in 32 provinces out of 38 provinces in Indonesia. Inklusi partners with 11 national CSO partners that were selected to a competitive process, and because the program invests in a strength of the civil society, the 11 civil society organizations work with more than 100 local civil CSO across Indonesia. Inklusi also work with 8 research partners that help to inform approach of the program through various research topics. As a program that apply locally led development in civil society strengthening in JETC, Inklusi apply locally development across stage of the program. I'm glad this in line with opening address of Professor Prasad. So in terms of the planning and programming, it was led by the CSO within the agreed parameters that the governance of the program was set. And In terms of the monitoring, evaluation, learning, and adaptation, it is also led by the CSO partner, and some of the approach that the program, that the CSO do is through participatory evaluation for adaptation and learning. I'll take you to some highlight of inclusive activity and progress to date. So the program, the CSO, established a lot of community-based model and using the strong network that the CSO have to support marginalized group, including women, people with disability, ethnic minorities, to access their rights, such as helping them to get legal identity and then refer survivors of gender-based violence to access legal aid, psychosocial, and health services. Inclusive CSO partners also support local government filling the data gaps, bring all marginalized groups that often are not exist within government system to the surface, and then eventually, hopefully, it improve data collection approach and system of government of Indonesia. So this is some of the concrete example of what Inclusive doing in terms of supporting marginalized group to access their basic services. So in Indonesia, legal identity, and I'm sure in most countries in the world, legal identity is a prerequisite for community to access public service like social protection program, health insurance. So through Inclusive, the CSO help marginalized group, direct them to the government system and help them to have a legal identity. Another highlight is on empowering marginalized. Another highlight is empowering marginalized group. Sorry with the tech issue. Empowering marginalized group to participate in public policy. Some of Inclusive CSO partners successfully advocate local government to have inclusive perspective in public policy. So the previous slide show how local society in East Nusa Tenggara province successfully advocate local government to build disability-friendly infrastructure in some of the villages in East Nusa Tenggara province. So finally, just want to highlight on what we've learned so far. Australian government designed Inclusive as a catalyst that empowers civil society and marginalized group, the core of locally development spirit, because when the community is empowered to really prioritize what they want, what they need, what is important within the agreed parameters, as long as it's aligned with government priorities, the society will take ownership of their development. And then the whole vision on inclusivity and sustainability that us as development practitioners often envision will not just be a promise. But with this deliberate choice comes risk and unintended consequence. The process requires a lot of consultation, listening to community at the grassroots. So it also has consequences to design of the program and then the period of the program. So it requires both the donors and also our implementing partner to stay adaptive to make sure the program delivers the objective. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten, Doreen, Petra, and Ramot for those great presentations. So we've got about half an hour for questions. What I might look to do is cluster them, so see if we can group 2 or 3 questions together, and then we'll get the panel to respond. Whilst you're thinking of those questions, I just want to take this opportunity to contradict Petra. So Kirsten and I are on the panel because of the great work that you, Doreen, and Ramot are doing, sort of leading these innovative programs that are really wrestling with the challenge of making locally led development work in practice. Okay, I'll start on this side. We've got two next to each other.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presenter. This is a very nice presentation. So I got the very comprehensive capture related to how the Australian collaboration could support the locally led development. I'm interested, the one from the Catherine said that there is some barriers that you set the list, and then there is also the best practice on that. So the question is related to the one point about the trust and control. So what do you mean about this trust and control, and how you overcome to ensure the sustainability of the Australian support and collaboration related to locally led development? Thanks.
So thank you. My name is Mike Wolf. I'm independent. I'm serving on the locally led development working group for the IDCC, the International Development Contractors Community. And so I have a question, just thanks all the panelists. We have, of the 5 of you, 3 of you represent maybe implementing organizations within the development ecosystem, and 2 of you represent funding organizations within the ecosystem. So the question that I'll offer to any of you is this. If you had the goal of making Australia's aid program 100% locally led development as the norm, that the entire Australian aid program made it normative practice to have locally led development, and you were given, and I gave you a magic wand, what is one thing that you would do?
Thank you. I'm Yelena Park from Development Pathways, a social protection experts group. Thank you. And my question is most likely for Doreen from BSEP, and maybe a little bit to Kirsten. And my question is about emerging leaders. What are you thinking about sort of pathways to retain your program's alumni? And maybe from the DFAT perspective, if this is not captured by BSEP, I want to call it BICEP, is there another program in your design or plans to actually retain emerging leaders in countries so they would sort of pay back after graduating from your program? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to invite the panel to respond. So, Kirsten, do you want to start with responding to the trust and control question, and by all means weigh in on what you would do with your magic wand at the same time?
I was going to say I need the help of others around the table too on that one, on those questions. They're big questions. So on the trust and control, so I think on the trust side it is about partnership and equitable partnerships. On the control side, there are some things that DFAT can't change as a bilateral funder. And that's things around national legislation. So that's the constant dance for us, is trying to make sure that we still meet our legislative compliance, whereas at the same time building capability, giving as much funding as we can, getting out of the way kind of thing. So it is a constant dance along that continuum for us. And that's why sometimes DFAT will partner directly, and other times it's actually important for us to use intermediaries, whether they're INGOs or multilaterals as well, and they often can do things in a different way to us, and they can give that patient funding and support. And it means that we can operate at scale. So the great thing about the Inclusi case study too is DFAT, it'll be harder for us to have a direct relationship with 140 CSOs, but having an important intermediary there, or 11 of them in that case, there's 11 facilitating partners, means we can operate at scale in a way we can't if we were doing it directly. So all those kind of trade-offs in those decisions. On the one magic wand, I think I would go partner-led in what we do. So we have different pathways in DFAT. You can either do DFAT-led or partner-led, but I would do a lot more through partner-led design and granting and partnering. Budget support's a great example of that. Who wants to talk next?
Doreen, do you want to take on the emerging leaders question, and then Petra and Ramot, you might want to come in on magic wands? Yeah.
All right. I think for us in this room is to understand that the concept, the locally led development, is a concept that it's going to be a journey. It's going to be a long ride. It's not easy, and we need to bring all implementers on this journey together with us. For my magic one, it is a program that is locally led, and it contributed to a change in Papua New Guinea, whether it's through a policy or it's through a dialogue that you bring all the church leaders together and have a conversation with the government official or the Prime Minister. That's something that we'd like to see happening as well, and that's not something that has been happening. Yes.
Waving my magic wand, Commonwealth procurement guidelines. No. So I actually feel it's all from the building of self-trust or confidence of our local leaders is just as important, to stand up and speak up and take on leadership roles. And too often, because maybe the tradition of donors, etc., so it's always, kowtowing and handout and stuff, and how we need to, as local leaders, I feel we need to also step up to the game. Thanks.
Magic one. Luckily or fortunately, inclusive, even though the program led by civil society strength, but we have a very supportive government who are really open to advice from civil society. In fact, this week we are doing a collaborative visit between civil society representative and government of Indonesia official to learn from Australia on gender equality agenda.
Okay, I'll answer the magic wand question too, so you don't feel that I'm escaping. So I guess I would wave my magic wand targeting sort of organisational culture within DFAT. So I think the most valuable thing I think we would need to change is accelerating the mindset change, particularly at senior levels across the department, about the nature of doing development well. So I think our keynote speaker, Professor Prasad, put it well. If you're not doing locally led, then you're not doing development. And we need a greater recognition of that fact at senior levels across our organisation and indeed other organisations. I'm going to go to this side for the next round of questions and move back to the middle. Yeah, there's two in the middle here.
Hi, Karen Winterford from the Institute for Sustainable Futures at the University of Technology, Sydney. I'm interested in the perspective of accountability and learning in relation to international development, and often our monitoring and evaluation systems are very much upward accountability, and I'm interested in the panel's perspective on locally led development and what that means to MEL and how MEL can be further orientated towards locally led development. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Prima from Alinea International. So my questions would be, since Andrew, you're talking about mindset change or organizational culture, I'm interested to know what would be the incentive mechanism working with the managing contractors, encouraging recruitment of team leaders. My questions would be, it's because, on ground realities, we locally led development often been translated to maximizing the recruitment of the local staff, but reserving the top management positions to the expatriates. So it sounds like a metaphor, but also the other fact that managing contractor often also recruits so many local staff, but does not partner enough, which means that's actually, limiting I don't know, the opportunities for the local partners to really work in partnership and collaborations. My other questions would, of course, goes to Petra and Doreen. As a local team leaders, I'm sure you're the minority team leaders. So, your perspective on challenges, being a team leader, so local team leaders, in a development world that is, dominated with white gaze, dominated with structural, just racism. That is still very much because there's not enough incentive mechanism to recruit team leaders, to encourage the local staff, and that we can step up in a leadership position, and that our expatriate partners could actually upend the privilege and work with us towards locally led development. Over. Thank you.
Thank you. I might throw to the panel, unless the two questions here relate. Do they relate to this line? Okay, so let's come back to the panel, and then we'll get another round of questions. So who wants to reflect on the accountability and MEL implications of locally led development? Ramot, you want to take that first? Okay.
Thanks for the question. So in inclusive, it applies in the design, planning, up to the monitoring evaluation of the program. We set there's a agreed parameter where all of the activities align with government of Indonesia development priorities, and the work and evidence that CSO generate, it links to the Indonesian government development goals and indicators. And the CSO, they're doing a lot of work across Indonesia, but they the innovation from a lot of community-based model that they produce, and then a lesson learned story from the field, it links to government through the government's arrangement of the program, and it also government has also indicated that they are willing to replicate it to their own, to Indonesia's state budget. And then our managing contractor also facilitate cross-learning where both government and civil society could learn from each other. Thank you.
So Doreen and Petra, do you want to take on the question around the challenge of being a local team leader?
Yeah. Okay. For those of you who've worked in Papua New Guinea, I think this is the first time that you see a female team leader. It is challenging. It is challenging. It is not easy. And it's simply because how development has been done in the country. And when I say development, it's through the donor agencies. Heads of programs have always been expatriates. I am working in a country where the big man mentality is rife in the system as well, where sometimes we see women as inferior, but not so much in the case. I think it's simply because if it's who you know in the government system as well, and in the whether in the private sectors and also in the civil society. But it is challenging within the staff itself, where because of the one-sex system that we have in the country, people see me as I'm going to save the world. I'm going to save them from anything that they do is not accepted in the program. So these are the challenges that I go through. I'm trying to be diplomatic here. These are the challenges that I go through. So some of the things that I try to do is, just have an open door policy where staff just come in and talk about anything and everything, so you give them that comfort as well, that I am not there to deliver a program, but I am also there to also strengthen the capability and the capacities that they have to thrive in their own roles and also for the program.
I think dealing with you're also always questioning yourself, right? Are you the right person, and what do you have that puts you in that position? So I think for me it's just taking the point that this is a privilege, and I am thankful and I am grateful. But from that, then, if we're working for our country, how can we then provide our inputs and our guidance to other people who perhaps are not as familiar with the context and situation, and sort of provide that guidance? So it doesn't necessarily have to be confrontational. Sometimes it does, just because you need to make a point. But so I think there's a lot of picking and choosing your battles, Prima. But I think because it's coming from a sense of we're all working towards the same goal, then you can always find points to interact, but and interlink. I just wanted to say also that there is also a role for the insensitive Westerner at times when I can't ask that question, but actually we can ask somebody from one of the A-base to ask that question, because it is a question that needs to be asked, and so there's a role for both, and it's finding that balance and really appreciating each other's roles and capacities. Thanks.
Kirsten, did you want to weigh in on anything?
Only the M&E.
Okay.
Yeah. So on M&E, under the new policy, it's MEL, monitoring, evaluation and learning. And yeah, it's not about upwards accountability to the fund. I mean, obviously we want results and we appreciate those. But we're trying to build in systematic 6-monthly reflections now in all projects that are coming through. So it's absolutely owned by stakeholders, and that's their reflections and for learning and adaptation. Now, some programs will adapt and are more sophisticated in that respect, but other programs aren't quite adaptive, but it's still about moving resources around flexibly. So yeah, that's the purpose of it, hopefully, and we can shift more in that direction.
Okay, let's keep going with our questions. So I've got one in the front, down here, one there, and then one at the back.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bania de la Fuente. I'm Senior Advisor on Healthy Aging at the Fred Halls Foundation. And I found the panel really interesting, and also hearing that one of the benefits that we can get from locally led development is precisely engaging disadvantaged communities in the country. Obviously, I have a keen interest in aging and older populations, and noting that countries like Indonesia, for example, will have a rapid demographic transition, reaching almost 1/3 of the population being above the age of 60 by 2050. I'd be interested to know how older populations have been engaged in some of the programs that you're referring to, noting that they are a key population group for development, but are often a neglected group in development programs. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, Helen Evans from the Nossal Institute for Global Health at Melbourne Uni. This has been a great session. I think it's really encouraging. We talked for a long time about the importance of community empowerment and civil society organisations, but it's often been theoretical, so I think it's really encouraging. Fantastic, so congratulations to everybody. I guess my question is probably more to Andrew and Kirsten, but I'd be interested in the panel's view. Having been a donor and a recipient, it's always a question of balancing risk against impact. And at the end of the day, I know that governments, it isn't just DFAT, it's all donor governments are accountable to their taxpayers. So how, and with civil society organisations, especially marginalised communities, the time frame is much longer, the burden of reporting, etc., means that very often they just don't get funded. So I'd be really interested to hear panel's reflections on how you balance that, recognising that, there does need to be a balance. Thanks.
And then at the back.
Hello, I'm Janet from Cambodia Development Resource Institute, Cambodia. So I have learned a lot from the presentations, and I want to learn more about the political economy environments where local leaders work. So my questions are, how do we ensure that locally led development projects do not reinforce the existing unequal local systems? And how do local leaders navigate the local political system so that they are not co-opted by local politicians to orient resources to their own constituencies rather than the wider communities? Thank you.
Okay, so let's turn back to our panel. Petra, you look like you're ready to answer, at least perhaps on the first question regarding the engagement with ageing populations, and then if you have any reflections on the political economy question, that would be great, and then we'll go round.
Okay, thank you for the question, and it is a really important. I'd encourage you also to attend Ted's session tomorrow. It's actually talking about adaptive management in a highly political context within Papua, but where the program is actually focusing on direct cash transfers for the elderly and utilizing more micro-based data systems that can be disaggregated to really pinpoint who are the elderly, where are they, and what are the challenges, as well as disaggregating down to people with disabilities, as well as women and children. And so I think this is what we've always been pushing around, data that sufficiently represents those who are at risk, and that's a large part of our work. So thank you for that. And more broadly, that is where a lot of the social protection programming is becoming oriented in Indonesia. Around the balance between risk and impact, I think there are the standards that there are non-negotiables, and then there's those that we can look at where we can take a risk. And I think, again, Ted's presentation tomorrow will look a bit about that, where we have taken risks in the past on certain pilots and certain programs. They have failed. But to what extent are the lessons that we've taken from that and now being reapplied not only address what were the particular risks beforehand, but now really help in building a stronger approach moving forward. So that's some of where we sometimes the impact comes a lot later, and often after the program itself is finished. And so that's why the risk is often worth it if you have that continued engagement, particularly, or else some other donor is going to take credit for it as well, which also happens. And then around the political economy, I think that's where having a mix of local leadership, so for instance with SKALA we have 3 different ministries, and that helps balance. And then with local governments also helps balance. So the more you actually interact and engage different leaders, it actually helps to balance out the overall tendencies for co-opting, et cetera, as well. And that's also where it's very useful to have the e-base or the coming in where we can't say no, but then the Australian official can very easily say no to certain things. Thanks.
I'll touch on the political economy one. I'd like to also acknowledge the other Papua New Guinean who are sitting in the room today, where they have very key roles in the different organizations that they're working in, Jules, Jen, and the others. And these are the women that are very powerful also in the country. They've got very strong networks. So in terms of political economy, we go through our staff that has got good engagement, relationship with the other government sectors as well. In BSEP, we've got a joint steering committee where it's co-chaired by DFED and also the government of Papua New Guinea. So we use that as an avenue to inform the government of the day on what the program is doing. So you'll see up on the board when I had a snapshot on BSEP and the kind of work that we are supporting coalition for change, social accountability. Who knows that? They're a very sensitive topic back in a complex environment like PNG, so we use that JSC avenue to talk about the program, so they're also on board with us on implementation on the program. Thank you.
Inclusive support to elderly in Indonesia. So CSO, they have their collective action where they responsive to government requests. In terms of support to elderly, inclusive CSO has been requested to support a national strategy to making sure that the elderly receive better access in terms of social assistance in Indonesia, and also improve local government data collection towards aging elderly. And then on political economy dynamics, Indonesia currently is developing the long and medium-term development plans. Again, through that collective action, the 11 is CSO partners that Inclusive partnering with, they support meaningful participation of marginalized group across Indonesia to that process. And similar to Petra, just want to encourage all of you to also attend the session later this afternoon, where the session will comprised of panel from Government of Indonesia and civil society representative that really touch upon how civil society Indonesia working side by side with government to making sure in establishment of the Indonesia medium and long-term development plans. And also for the upcoming election in Indonesia, the civil society also promote inclusive participation to the election, and also provide a lot of material to the parliament candidate that will also help them to making sure whatever the campaign, it will also support society needs. Thank you.
Kirsten, I'm going to go to another round of questions unless you want to weigh in on risk and impact. Okay, so we've got a trifecta in the middle. I have neglected the middle section thus far, just for everyone's information. Go ahead, sir.
Thanks, Andrew. Jason Brown from the Australian Humanitarian Partnership, and apologies for bullying my way into a question. My question's actually to Kirsten as the champion of locally led development for DFAT, and it's around the language of localisation. Is it important? Does it matter? It was good to see the OECD working definition up there, and nice to know there's another 6 months of finessing that sentence. What I do notice is that all of the global north or the kind of internationally led definitions have a well-crafted get out of jail free card within them. In this particular instance it was agency as much as possible. I think in 2016 the Grand Bargain was a huge step in the humanitarian reform, but the localisation almost fell over how we defined it. We ended up with as local as possible, as international as necessary, and I'll leave it to everyone else to decide who decides what is necessary. So I just wondered, with our guidance and our adoption throughout DFAT, is there an opportunity to reduce some of the ambiguity in that policy domain? Thank you.
Just right behind you, Jason.
Hi, my name is Michaela Highland-Wood, and I'm representing ACR, the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research. So we know that locally led development places significant additional responsibility and onus on our local partners, and that means that we need to see new leaders coming through the system, and unless we borrow that magic wand again, that's not going to happen overnight. And Doreen touched on it in the BSEP program, but I was wondering to the other presenters, what sort of creative training opportunities have you been utilising in your programs, things like local university programs, internships, other youth capacity building programs, to bring emerging leaders through the system, and particularly female emerging leaders.
Okay, and our last question.
Yes, thank you. This is Hyung from Vietnam Peacemakers Organization, which is a local CSO based in Cambodia. My question is that I'm interested in, like what you have discussed earlier in terms of including the local actors throughout the program cycle. But beyond that, I was wondering how you tackling the deeper structures, for example, of the power dynamic between the donors, the INGO and the local CSOs or the communities, but also the funding structure, for example. How are we ensuring equitable resource distributions to ensure that there is not negative trickle-down type of effects to the communities? Because we all know that when we talk about local actors, they are not equal. They're coming from different backgrounds, either some from a privileged and underprivileged as well. So I really wondering how you're dealing with that, especially in terms of compliancy, for example, between all those local actors, the government counterpart, this INGO and the local CSO who probably do not have all the resources that the INGO have, for example. And like what Professor Prasad had just mentioned earlier, between the small state, whether the requirement is the same toward the bigger state. So the question is, how are you tackling these type of deeper structure in a more equitable and importantly intersectional approach type of thing to ensure that development is indeed for all and not for the privileged few? Thank you.
Okay, so 3 big questions with very little time left to play with from the panel. But Kirsten, do you want to take on the first one about whether terminology matters?
I think it does matter. I mean, it takes a while, right? Because it's a bureaucracy and you're dealing with lots of bureaucracies. I mean, I think the as much as possible is to account for different political environments. So different non-democratic regimes, where there's, major humanitarian crises and political flux. So I think that's the as much as possible language. But I just think we need, I think the Grand Bargain didn't have working definitions and that's where it kind of fell down. And so I think at least we're getting a lot closer to it. We're a few months away on that.
And who wants to tackle the questions around how you're addressing deeper power dynamics, structural barriers, as well as creative ways of building up the capability of local partners? Doreen, you want to come in? Great.
I think one thing I didn't mention was how do we manage the risk of preaching about localization, locally led development. So one of the things that happened last week was when we had a forum and we spoke about these, and one of the church group got up and said, oh, this is good. We are going to be having grants coming straight to us. But I think the thing that we as a program will need to massage into our partners is the compliance part of everything. We can preach about it, but we need to have systems in place to enable this organization to also thrive. One of the things that we did as part of the capacity building for our partners was to encourage them to apply for the Australian awards. But you can just imagine, most of the civil society organizations are based in the subnational. The criteria needs to be relaxed for them to be also meet the criteria of the different scholarships available and training. So what we are doing as an organization is to identify what are some of the training that can be made or conducted at the local level, but it will be understood by our partners on the ground. The other thing on funding, I think we as a program, we just need to ensure that we don't give too much to cripple organizations, and that's one thing where we, our aim is to encourage them to implement what they want to do, but we should be there to make them to build them up to success and not to fail.
Petra or Ramot, any last words from you?
I think Ramot's really good on the NGO relationship and power dynamics. So I was just going to answer on the capacity, and so a number of approaches that we've applied is around, for instance, specified positions for people with disabilities, so that aside from also encouraging, we're also providing opportunities moving forward for internships. But then what's been nice, and this is not a plug for DT Global, but it will sound like a plug for DT Global because DT Global's got their Emerging Leadership in Development program, and that also is where we specifically select women team members to represent the team as within that leadership program to then see how we can support their career enhancement.
Our CSO, their capacity are varied. Some of them, some of their expertise is on women's rights, and some of them, their expertise are on disability inclusion. This organization for people with disability, many of them are still really new to this program. So one of the, I would say, innovative approach that the program is doing is enabling this CSO to learn from each other. And also the program also encourage internship from other CSO who are not necessarily a partner of Inclusi. And in terms of the Inclusi works on so many sensitive issues in Indonesia, and it's a tricky part and a lot of this that we need to navigate. But one of the principles that we keep on emphasize is making sure do no harm principle applies across implementation of the program. The work of the program that try to address basic human rights of those marginalized groups like transgender, it also could, open them to other harms. So the program really try to navigate it by developing several strategies and approach. Thank you.
Look, thanks everyone. I know that there are more questions, but we're out of time, over time with this session. But thank you for your levels of engagement. And thank you to Ramot, Doreen, Kirsten and Petra for leading us through this, this great conversation. There are no magic wands, so it's clear that this is going to need to be a continuing conversation between DFAT, implementing partners and the broader development ecosystem of actors, and we're committed to that ongoing conversation. But thank you.